After 8 years of participatory research on Indigenous peoples' land tenure in Guyana, the Amerindian Peoples Association has launched the latest edition of Our Land, Our Life titled A Participatory Assessment of the Land Tenure Situation of Indigenous Peoples in Guyana. During a virtual launching ceremony recently, Rights Coordinator of APA Laura George lamented that Guyana's Indigenous peoples continue to face a number of threats to their land security. This, she said, prompted the survey which gathered data from residents of Regions 1, 2, 7, 8, and 9. This research highlighted a plethora of concerns. These were then summarized and recommendations were gathered from residents and regional leaders, elders, among other persons. Of specific interest is the fact that Indigenous peoples across the country recommended the revision of the Amerindian Act to bring it in line with international standards for protection of Indigenous peoples' rights and to improve the land titling process to better protect Indigenous land rights. When asked what are the next steps for protecting land rights, this is what Laura George had to say.
It is for the subsequent administrations who continue to ask for evidence. We have evidence here in these reports that can guide policy and legislative reform. So again, once there is political will, you have this information, and for Indigenous peoples from the other side to meet to say, this is what we demand, these are our rights that we demand to be protected.
On the issue of whether the government has expressed interest in this process, APA Executive Director Gina Rose had this to say.
Then opposition came into government and we heard the same thing, and then take us to our next campaign session. The then opposition is now in government and we hear the same thing. So it's difficult for me to forecast, to predict what the various government will do. I don't want to follow the same pattern that I've heard since 1992.
She added that with such hardcore evidence and research, the issues will be taken to the government to be addressed immediately. Meanwhile, via a telephone interview with this newscast, Geographic System Information Specialist and Forest Policy Officer Michael Garway explained that the APA has always introduced a geographic database which consolidates observations taken over the organization's 20-year history of conducting fieldwork with Indigenous communities and district councils.
Additionally, we also launched a geodatabase which contains information about spatial information, spatial data.
The database is managed and continuously updated by APA and local Indigenous partners. The Rainforest Foundation US and Forest Policy Program have supported the assessment and establishment of the database. Reporting for AGP Nightly News, Naomi Williams.